Welcome to Truth Telling with Elizabeth D'Alto, the podcast dedicated to focusing on the truth that's always evolving within us and around us, where we explore the potentiality of truth as a highly esteemed value, especially in the context of everything that falls under the topics of healing, growth, leadership, and creativity. If you're new to me, full expression is my jam. I'm the creator of a practice called Wild Soul Movement. My flagship year-long online women's circle is called Power. I run virtual new moon circles every month, weekend workshops all over the planet throughout the year, and I work with clients one-on-one. I also started doing stand-up comedy for fun in 2018. So this is a place where you can come with your multiple talents and passions to be encouraged, nourished, and cultivated. There's a lot of noise and ignorance in our current culture, and this show also aims to cut through that by exploring the truths of a diverse range of incredible voices. From authors, artists, creatives, and educators to activists, speakers, and those in various scientific and esoteric fields, our guests hail from cultures and countries all over the world. The main intention here is to contribute to creating a kinder, gentler, more curious, collaborative, reverent world where people respect each other's backgrounds, experiences, and truths, and they trust in themselves and in life and recognize that we need each other. We post a new interview every Monday, and if you want to keep up with the show notes and quotes from our guests, you can follow me on Instagram at Elizabeth D'Alto. A few disclaimers. No episode of the show is meant for everyone, and every episode is meant for whoever needs it on the right day at the right time. Not all guest views will reflect my own, and that's intentional. We don't learn, grow, heal, or improve by staying in our comfortable bubbles with all of our people who look, think, or live exactly how we do. If you love what you hear and find it useful and inspiring, the best way to show your appreciation is to share the episode, subscribe to the show, and leave us a rating or review wherever you listen in from. Thank you so much for being here, and here we go. This is episode number 307 of Truth Telling with Elizabeth D'Alto, and today we are talking about using water, dance, and movement for trauma healing with Rocio Navarro. You all know how much I geek out on conversations about trauma and how we can move through things in ways that are accessible to us and honor where we are in life. And so today's conversation covers so much of that. Rocio's big truth was about the nuances in how surrender is used in our culture. And from there, we talked about stepping into the unknown and being open to possibilities and how beautiful, hard, and everything in between life can be, full spectrum. Rocio shared how she uses and engages with water as a healing element and a path that reveals as water is an element that encapsulates so much of life in all of these different densities. We talked about the relationship between hypervigilance, strength, and resilience, dance as medicine and a trauma healing tool, and we even touched on working with dreams. This was a really rich, deep, and layered conversation about different ways we heal. I hope you listen more than once. Let me know what lands for you and share it with anyone you think of who can use it. The show notes will be at untameyourself.com/307. That's untameyourself.com/307. And to let you know what's coming up next week, if you're listening in real time, on May 27th, I recently had posted on my Instagram stories asking people what I should chat about this month in the solo episode. And I got a lot of business and entrepreneurship related questions. So I decided to do a solo biz chat. That is coming next week. And as well, the details for my summer business immersion. I did this for the first time last summer. It was super fun. It was one of the easiest promotions of all time. I literally sent out like 3 emails, made a couple of posts on Instagram, and that's how you really know an offer is aligned. It was so easy to fill. It was such an enjoyable thing to run. The women who were in it got so much out of it last summer. I'm really looking forward to doing it again. I'm actually going to make it a smaller group, make it even more intimate this summer. so we can focus and really dive in on whoever ends up in the immersion on helping you to grow your business and hone your craft and your skills and honor your gifts and all of these amazing things. So keep an ear out for that episode next week. On May 27th, it'll be episode number 308, as well as for the details to come in that episode as well. All right, y'all, let's get into the conversation with Rocio. Everyone, this is another one of those conversations. You know, I'm such a fan of these where I've been connecting with someone so long online and then finally get to chat with them and drop in. So Rocio Navarro is with us today. And I'm going to ask you our first two questions, and then I'm going to read the message that you sent me. That is the reason why we're having this podcast interview right now, which I'm so happy about. But how's your body? How are you feeling in your cells and in your bones today?
Yeah, it's interesting. Good question. So this particular weekend, really interesting. I went with a friend, went to a taco stand in South LA, went to go visit him. And this was really interesting for me to notice. There was a moment where we're in this parking lot, we're getting some tacos, and there was a subtle message that happened in my nervous system. And that message was, if there were to be a shooting in this moment or a fight were to break out, what would you do? So I scanned around and I figured out a strategy of what would happen in that situation. It was really interesting for me to notice because it was very subtle. It was a brief scanning and a brief decision-making that happened in that moment. And I was like, wow, that is so interesting. It reminded me of childhood because I grew up in the 90s, Northeast LA, gang culture, a lot of trauma happening and a lot of violence in my community, but also my household. So it was really interesting to be in that moment. Nothing was happening. Everything was fine. But my nervous system went into that place. And I was like, wow, just witnessing what was happening in that moment. So once I was able to figure out strategy, I was able to, come back into your body. Because right now you're in your trauma body. Mm-hmm. How do you come back to your trauma body? So I had to remember to breathe again, remember where I was placed. Placement was really important for me to orient myself and just keep reminding me that things were going to be okay. Mm-hmm. And I was fine once I grounded into my body. Came home and noticing just that it's taking me a little bit to recalibrate and to just get myself back into that state of like deep groundedness. And simple practices for me are always working out, doing a quick run, doing some push-ups, doing some yoga, whatever it is, just to like get in my body. But I remember that night I went home and I just placed my hand on my heart and on my belly. And that was just my way to, again, the vagus nerve, relax in the vagus nerve, breathe into it. You're safe, you're good. Even if it was that split second, because that split second has an effect on the nervous system. And the thing is that in this world, we live in hypervigilance majority of the time, depending also on the social structure in which you are placed or you are living and experiencing this world. So that was an interesting experience that I had coming into this morning. And this morning, I definitely feel a lot more grounded and energized. And I'm excited to be here speaking to you today. But I just wanted to share that because it was definitely a process for me, even if it was that minute second.
I'm so glad you shared this. So it was last year sometime, maybe even like about a year ago, when shootings happened in a bar in Thousand Oaks. Mm-hmm. And which at the time I was living in, was I in Malibu? No, I had already moved to the marina. But that was like 30 minutes from where I used to live. And then I think shortly just before that, there had been a shooting in a yoga studio. And I forget where that was. I don't think that was in California. I think that might have been in like Atlanta or something. And I remember calling my dad, and my dad has used guns, taught my brother how to shoot safely. And I remember being like, I want you to show me how to use a gun the next time I come home. Because I've read this book a couple of times many years ago called A Prayer for Owen Meany by an author named John Irving. Are you familiar with this book at all?
No.
The character has, I don't know if I've told the story on the podcast before. The character has a vision at some point of saving people, or maybe it's like this recurring dream or something. And he goes through this practice of being able to like live out the scene and practicing the skills that he would need to be able to do what he needs to do when he sees this vision in his mind. And it comes to fruition in the book. And like, it's just a book, it's a story.
Mm-hmm.
But my reason for that was we are living in these hypervigilant times when literally violence could occur anytime, anywhere. And I'm not the type of person who would like run or hide. I'm the type of person who would be like, okay, what are we going to do about this?
Yeah.
And so I'm like, I would want to know, how do you disassemble a weapon? How do you like disable it? You know what I mean? Like, and who knows? Like, who do I think I am? I'm not like Liam Neeson over here and Taken with like a specific set of skills, but there was just something about me that wanted to have more of an idea of what I could do. So kind of like you, scanning, like I'm good at the scanning. I could see the exit route, the doors, wherever we could push people, go over there, blah, blah, blah. But I don't like, I know myself and I'm like, I would like to know what to do because I don't think I could not do something if the opportunity presented itself. So it's fascinating. And, you know, we can think these things about ourselves until we're actually in the situation.
In the moment.
Right? Maybe you see my ass and I'm the first one running down the street. Like, this bitch thought she was going to save people.
The stories we create. But yeah, it's until we get into that moment that we know how we respond, you know?
Totally.
And But that doesn't mean that their preparation doesn't enhance the way that you respond, right?
100%. Practice
of something can definitely change the trajectory of how you choose it in that moment.
Yeah. So, you know, just starting out the podcast with love and light.
Love and light, I know.
This is why the name of the show has to be truth telling, you know? So the other question I like to start with that will really guide also the rest of the conversation is, what is a truth that's having a big impact on your life right now?
Oof, many. You know, when you asked that question, I sat with it for a little bit, and the first word that showed up for me was surrender. And the reason why surrender came up was because there's so many nuances in how surrender is used in our culture. I feel there's a passivity around surrender and how we perceive it and how we respond to it. And it's almost, I feel like the interpretation or the definition of it is like, when you surrender, you're open, you're this open vessel, and then all this information comes and you're good. And you keep living life in this way and everything is blissful and great.
That'd be amazing if that's how it actually worked.
Right? It would be an easy life, but that's not life. Life is complex and it's beautiful and it's hard and everything in the middle of the spectrum. What I was sitting with and how surrender is showing up in my life is, again, another texture or another level of understanding it. And this is the reason why I love doing this particular work with water, and how water, personally for me, is a teacher. And is a path that continues to unveil things in my life. And as I was sitting with it and as I was reflecting of how surrender is impacting my life right now, it's really about stepping into the unknown. When you say, I'm opening myself because there's something that I have been doing or this thing that I have known, surrender really is about stepping into a place that I have no idea what it's about. And I'm opening myself deeply to the possibilities, and I have to activate a level of trust because I don't know what's on the other side. And I have to believe on some way that there's something for me on the other side that I can maybe reject, because I think there's an action to surrender. Surrender is not passive. And I have to believe that once I come across this information that is coming to me in this process of surrendering, that I will respond to it or make a choice that may feel good or not still.
Yeah.
But that's what we get to redefine. And and make choices and mess up again still, and still hopefully extract a lesson from it and say, okay, how can I do this a little different? If I receive some information, I open myself up. There's so much ambiguity. I don't know, but I'm trusting that something's there.
Mm-hmm.
How can let me try to do this thing. It may work out. It may not.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so amazing what you just said, because in Wild Soul Movement and in my year-long women's circle, which is called Power Now, in my curriculum, which is called the Arc of Power,
Mm-hmm.
the first topic is surrender and release, and then it's trust and receptivity. So I'm well aware that surrender is so hard for people. And the reason I pair it with release is because in order to surrender, we've got to let so much stuff go. We need the space. Surrender actually requires space for the unknown, like what you're saying, for things to come through that we don't know what they're going to be. Maybe it's an opportunity, maybe it's a challenge, whatever. Like you said, full spectrum. And then when we are able to like kind of start to step out of the way, right? And I wrote down while you were talking, one of the things that we work through and on and practice in power is how do you personally do surrender? Because it does sound so passive. Oh, just surrender. There's so much action there. There's so much, and again, practice, deep practice. All of these things are practice, because depending on the life area, it's probably easier for folks to surrender in some areas than other, because they might feel safe, or they might have a level of confidence or proficiency or whatever, right? And then comes trust, because we need space. And like you said, it's so funny, like you described the process. And then we have to cultivate the trust, but you can't really trust without surrender, and you can't really surrender without trust. And I actually have a friggin' tattoo that says allow, comma, beloved, because to me, the word allow is that combination of surrender and trust. And the opposite of both of those things is control.
Oh, the shadow side. The shadow side and it's all intertwined.
All
right?
intertwines, which is, so I love that you work with water, because water is an element that actually allows us to surrender in a way that we can't just standing with our feet on the earth.
Water, I feel, is such a powerful element of life to be able to use as a metaphor to navigate through, because on a physical level, one, we gestate in water for 9 months. We come from the fluids of our parents, gestate for 9 months. We are born into this world encapsulated. This is what I always say. We're encapsulated in a world of different densities of water. We are majority water. I mean, bodies of water are what connect land masses. But if you really look at it, what is the sky? The sky is just, it's the evaporation of water in another form. So we're breathing water all the time. And if we look at water as, in terms of what water does and is, this living element that is constantly morphing and receiving, it's the receptor. Literally why the Akashic records is so important. Like if you understand it on this physical level, that everything that we say, we think, we breathe gets imprinted into water in the air. That information is there. We have access to that there, and we have access to that information in our cells. So that's why water is so deep. I mean, it's deep on so many different levels, because we're majority of that on a physical level, but also like the information that is there is available. And we also have the ability to transform it and imprint it in a different way, right? There's tons of studies that have showed speak to water in a particular way. The composition of water changes. It morphs into the energy of what is being intended upon. We are that too, right? You curse someone, you're imprinting that person. You bless someone, you're blessing that person. You're changing literally the waters of that person. Very challenging to do. This is not an easy thing to do. However, water becomes also the ability to help us understand and to clear so that we can see and work, for me, in life with more sacredness in that way, with more perception.
Mm-hmm.
It literally opens up the third eye. It opens up those places where we have felt so inhibited. And, you know, the particular work that I do with water is absolutely taking someone in a deep surrendered state in water. And so what that does to the nervous system is really powerful. I mean, we were just talking about trauma and how it's embedded in the nervous system. That's working with someone who is floating in body temperature water in a state of surrender, being held by someone, knowing that, okay, you may not fully trust the person at some point, or there may be triggers that come up based on your experience. However, you're still being held. Mm-hmm. And if you're letting go, really, if there's that opportunity to just let go a little bit, then more information can come to you, because water is also is talking to you.
Mm-hmm. There's literally so many metaphors here. I could explode from excitement. I love metaphors. And I'm thinking about, so we were chatting before we started recording, and I'll have you share a little bit more about like your background and how you came to do the work that you're doing. But one of the things that you mentioned as part of your training is called Watsu. And I have done this once. I was in Costa Rica. I was running a retreat in 2015. And that part of it, of being held, is so, especially, and a lot of people who listen to the show can relate to this. A lot of people are, you know, whether they're a mom or whether they run a business or whether they have an important role at a job or in their community or in their family, like they are literally, figuratively, metaphorically, but also like just very, really, truly, literally in their lives every day, holding so much that to be held is such a gift. Not always comes easily, right? Like that, like it comes back to the surrender, but just the like, the hypervigilance, which you mentioned that word earlier, which is something that I've been really letting go of a lot this year. I've had a lot of that in my system. It's an amazing thing. And I'd be curious for your input on this. A lot of us who are inclined towards that hypervigilance, I want to say, misassociate that with true strength. So the fear of releasing the hypervigilance is becoming weak or vulnerable. It's not true.
Nope. And again, this is part of the cultural paradigms that there's resiliency in that. And I just want to honor that as human beings, we're constantly adapting to the way that culture is shifting, because it's constantly shifting. Yeah. So I want to honor and not minimize also the roles that women have taken and the whys, because there has been a reason for that. Humans overall, but if we're talking specifically about women in this culture, and also like, right, having to be the caretakers and the professionals and constantly being the holders for many others, there's a reason for that. So I just want to just acknowledge that. Yes, and the polarity of that is to surrender, because you've carried on this particular task for such a long time. It becomes part of your identity. So when it becomes part of your identity, it's not easy to let go of. Mm-hmm, That's the work with an ego. And so to go to the other side takes time, but it's needed, because surrender, and we have to look at the polarity of the spectrum of life. If we're not navigating on one end or the other, where's the balance in between? Mm-hmm. Then it gets really taxing. And this is where diseases and imbalances really happen. Who wouldn't want to be, I mean, we would say probably not some of us who are really working with our trauma bodies, but when was the last time that we were really held by someone? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Without any judgment or even conversation? Like sometimes we go into our mind, our thinking mind around what we're feeling versus just allowing the feeling to be what it is and being held by someone. in a non-judgmental way, right? So definitely has a huge effect, and it's important. I think it's important for us to hold each other. And what does that look like?
And I'm thinking of the variety, the varying abilities and levels and layers of health that people may or may not be experiencing who are listening, right? Like we have folks with chronic illness, we have folks with disabilities, we have folks who are challenged with mental illness, or even just like disorders or anxiety or depression from time to time, and how, optimal health isn't a very individual thing, right? So whatever someone is dealing with, what is most optimal for you will be based on all the things that like you're holding or working with or dealing. And I've been in some deeper conversations recently with some friends who have health challenges. Mm-hmm. And I'm more present to that these days too, because one of the things our culture does is the norm is, quote, healthy, which health is such a loaded word, like almost impossible to define. But able-bodied, right? Or people who have more capabilities physically or less pain physically, right? Yeah. So I just want to acknowledge anyone listening that whatever is optimal for you, like honor your own, whatever is your optimal here as we discuss and as we talk about these things. So, I love this. I love it so much. So I want to read, let's come back to why we're even having this conversation. You sent me this message and you gave me permission to read it. So I'm going to read it for the listeners. She said, "Hi, love your work and your posts. I just felt some inspiration. Wondering if you'd be open to having a guest feature where we both dance and let loose and have a brief convo about dancing and healing." So this is us having the conversation about dancing and healing. And actually, I just realized when we started recording that we live in the same city. So we will do this live at some point. This is a raw creative vision that came up and more to be explored, of course. Last 6 years, I've thought about the way that my family dealt with trauma, and it was through dance. We didn't have much, but a small room of 15 to 20 Mexican immigrants in the 80s and 90s was the way we somatically released. Anyhow, feel it out. If it resonates, we can have a convo. And I was like, I love this idea. Are you free to chat in like 3 days? Like, yeah. Because, and we were also saying this before we started recording, we have a lot of conversations about healing on the podcast. We talk about trauma. We talk about social justice. We talk about the varying circumstances and systems that might impact the access people have to healing modalities. But that doesn't mean people can't be healing. And so I would love to know, tell us about this. What was this like in your family? Did people know that that's what they were doing? Was there like an intention to work through trauma, or was it just like very natural, primal, innate that people were like, this shit is hard, meaning life. Let's put on the music and dance. And then you felt better? Like, tell us about it.
Yeah. It's so again, my family came over late 70s, early 80s into the United States, and it was interesting. It was hard for them. And a very different experience than what people are experiencing now, of course. But I just remember my mom's side of the family is a huge family, and we all lived in very small places, but we would come together every weekend. And the memories that I had was there was definitely a lot of alcohol, definitely violence in the family. However, there were these moments where we would all come together, aunts, uncles, cousins, my sibling at the time, because my younger sisters weren't born yet. My grandmother was around, and my grandmother was a dancer. This is how she learned to deal with her pain. And I realized that was her medicine. And I just remember us being in a small little living room and literally like 15, 20 of us just dancing with each other and dancing to cumbias and laughing. And those were the memories that in my somatic body reminded me of the resiliency of my family. This was the way that they communed because they felt so isolated and defeated. And this was the only moment that their bodies could release. And now as I have gotten into body work, I'm understanding the deeper layer of that and how resilient they were and how they listened. They listened to a part of their body that was so important in terms of how release happens. And that's the reason why I gravitated towards you. I was like, you're doing these dances, and you're in your body, and you're showing how easy and simple and needed this is to be able to do that. And it just reminded me of that facet of my life and how important that is. And dance for me is also medicine. Like if I'm not moving, if I'm not moving my body, then I know I feel stuck.
Mm-hmm.
Because when you're moving hips, you're moving the essentially the cranial sacral fluid as well. That is affecting it's the nervous system that's affecting the way that your brain is also interpreting information. So if we can look at it from that context, it's like how powerful it is for us, again, to just be in our body and have fun and let loose and not just be stuck up here. Because this is also a culture that takes us into our brain versus experiencing all of who we are.
100%. So earlier this year, to give a little context for anyone listening, in case you're not on social media, going into this year, I wanted to enjoy social media more than I had been. It was feeling very draining, but for me in my life and my business, it's not negotiable because this is one of the ways that I connect with you all. A lot of you listening, with my audience, the way we connect. I always invite you, after you listen to these episodes, DM me on Instagram. Like, I answer my own DMs. I love that. I love hearing from you. A lot of you share the episodes in your stories and things like this, and with quotes, and I get to see what's impacting. Like, I literally do get so much out of being on social media. And it's part of how we build a relationship with the community here and build the community. And so, like, not being on social media isn't an option for me, even though I know there's a lot of arguments for that. But I was like, how can I make it more enjoyable? And I was like, I do embodiment work, so I'm going to post movement videos almost every day. Mm-hmm. I originally started out by saying I would do 333 out of 365 days, but then I realized that was creating an enormous amount of pressure for me. Mm-hmm. And the point wasn't to force myself to show up. Like, I don't have an issue with visibility, right? Like, that wasn't, I'm fine, but I was realizing I wanted to take weekends off and give myself a little space. And as well, I track my menstrual cycle. There are times during my cycle when my energy is low, or I just feel tender and I don't feel like being seen that day. So I was like, all right, let me bump this down to 222. But it's interesting because in Wild Soul Movement, actually, when I do the movement practice in our weekend workshops or as part of the Power program, we don't use music. Because for many years I was a group exercise instructor, and the music kept the pace. It kept people going, but it also distracted people and helped them get through their workout. And the point of Wild Soul Movement is to get out of the head and into the body, so to not have the distraction of the music, to be with your thoughts, to be with your emotions, to be with whatever's coming up. But then during these embodiment videos, I noticed I wanted to dance. Any given day, what kind of mood am I in? And as I've been doing these almost every single day this year, it's been so healing for me. And to connect with the rhythm. And then what has happened more is it got me back into my own Latin roots, back into salsa. Like, I love Latin beats, Latin music. Like, most days for the last few months, it's been like salsa or bachata or some kind of Spanish guitar or something. And I'm not like apologizing for that. And I'm not feeling like, oh, I need to play some different kind of music because my audience isn't just Latin people. I'm like, no, like, this is me. Yeah. So this will be for me. And, you play what you want to play, and then we're just going to move. It's brought up and helped and healed so much for me that I didn't even know was there. So I've been rambling for a few minutes now. We'll get back to you. But just to say, it really resonates and brings up so much that we wouldn't be able to like think or journal or talk therapy our ways into by just having all the sensual connection and activity of like, there's music, there's emotion, there's feeling, there's movement. There's letting go of judgment of whether or not you're a dancer or have any training or whatever.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And there's still the particular fragmentations of the brain that want to condition certain people to believe even whether they know how to dance or not, right? And it keeps you locked. And the safer that you can create or environments can be created for you to just fucking let loose and
Mm-hmm.
see what's there. Again, it's the surrender and stepping into the unknown. You have no idea what this body's capable of.
Totally.
We don't. And that's why looking at athletes or looking at people that are doing incredible things with their body, it's like the resiliency of the human body and the brain is really powerful. Can we appreciate it all and take aspects of it and just play with it to see what's there?
100%. And I've said this on the podcast before, but it clicked in for me a year or two ago that one of the things that got me through, my early life was that I was athletic. I always played sports. I was always out and about, running around, doing something in the street, riding a bike. I was so active that I was processing and releasing things without even realizing. Because
Right.
when I quit personal training and I stopped moving as much, the level of emotional intensity in my life went through the friggin' roof.
Yeah. Yeah. Then you're just stuck in one, the energy just moves into it. It's inclined to just move in one direction versus getting moved around.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just thinking, like, it doesn't even require that much movement, just simply moving our heads or even our eyes in different directions. Again, you're rewiring the brain to just get out of that rigid thought process that you're in.
Yeah.
Simple things.
Which, like you're saying, and even the eyes, right? Like there's a somatic therapy called EMDR, which I've heard amazing, amazing things about for rewiring the brain. And these things are also more accessible, these smaller movements for folks who, for whatever reason, might not be able to dance wildly in their underpants in the living room. Like it doesn't, my expression or my way or somebody else's doesn't have to be the thing that works for you. But it could, even these small, very subtle movements. And I remember asking, do you know Michaela Bohm?
No.
I remember asking her about this because she does embodiment as well. And she teaches a lot of workshops and she's been traveling for many years. And we were talking about this ability. And she said that one of the things that led her to developing one of her practices was actually when she was injured, when she couldn't walk. Because part of her healing, she has land in Ojai, would be walking on her land. And there was a time when she couldn't walk. And that's when she started developing this like subtle movement practice. So again, for anyone listening, for whatever reason, if you can't, do big movements, a lot of movement or like rigorous movement, that's not the only option.
Yeah. Yeah. There's plenty. Absolutely. Thank you for mentioning that. And a lot of times when we discover those things, sometimes it comes out of, personal experiences that we go through. And we're just, again, that's the deeper knowing within us that is searching for the thing to help us move through that time in our life or to find a solution to the thing.
Yeah.
That's the resiliency that happens. And it's incredible just hearing stories like that. So
yeah. And I love that you keep coming back to resiliency because this is also something I've realized over the last few years. And I wrote this down earlier when we were talking about hypervigilance and strength. Resiliency is the expression of like true strength, of integrated strength. And again, I hate to use the word healthy sometimes because it could be like a vague descriptor, but it is. Resiliency to me is like you were saying, things exist on a spectrum. I would see hypervigilance and resiliency existing on a spectrum, and hypervigilance being the more like shadow, I don't understand, I haven't processed, this is where I go. And then resiliency is the more like I've integrated, I have awareness, I understand, I'm able to observe myself a little bit more and choose my response rather than my nervous system hijacks me and has a hypervigilant response.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, totally. Yeah, I didn't think about it in those terms, but it definitely makes sense. That is a spectrum.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, let me ask you something else because you do all these types of healing, and this is something I've learned from my friend Rachel Maddox, who's been on the show a few times, and she works with trauma. So I'm more inclined, and it sounds like you are too, to like the hyper response.
Yeah.
But there's the hypo as well, right? There's the people who freeze, who wouldn't have that thing that you had in the parking lot of like scanning. They would just maybe go, "We need to leave. I can't be here."
Yeah, and retract.
Yeah.
Retract, and absolutely. I definitely have aspects of that too. I'm still understanding aspects of myself, and I don't always respond to one way. It depends on the situation as well.
Yeah.
There's moments where I completely freeze and I have no idea what to do. And I just go into this like hermit bubble and I'm frozen. So it just depends on the situation as well. So yeah, my response is definitely still within the spectrum. I don't necessarily gravitate towards one or the other. So it's really interesting to also observe and see how I respond to certain situations.
That's cool. And without judgment, right? Like I'm not hearing any judgment for yourself, which feels super important.
And there's moments where, again, that happens as well. But it's the practice, again, because we don't always get it right. And there needs to be gentleness in it as well. And we don't always get to gentleness until one day we're just, there's a part of us that is completely fed up with hearing the same voice beating you up for having that particular response until, again, there comes enough energy to be able to say, what's the other option? Can I be more gentle in the moment? It's almost like there's a moment where there's an opening for you to see another perspective.
Yeah.
When you can hold a different perspective and say, oh, shoot, I am contracting in this moment. This is what I'm doing. And I'm aware that I'm doing it. How can I choose different?
Yeah.
How can I be gentle with, okay, or just acknowledge this is what I'm doing. Okay, this is what I'm doing. That's it. I don't need to change it. I just need to acknowledge it versus pushing it away or beating it up, because then that's suppression again.
Yeah. Yeah. I love this. So you and I were chatting about this a little bit before we started recording, but I'd love for you to share with people listening, like your path into your work, because and I think you and I share this. You have some formal training and you've done a lot of studying and deep practice, but ultimately a lot of it has evolved and synthesized into your own body of work.
Yeah. So how I got into this work, my background is I studied sociology and gender, ethnicity, and multicultural studies. My focus was always on the social structure and looking at how people interact with each other. What are the social systems in place that affect the way that we respond in the world? And I went into education, did some organizing work for some time, and I couldn't find an answer. It felt there was a deeper inquiry that I had, and there was a lot of frustration because I wasn't finding answers. So I personally went through. It was during a time where the work that I was doing was unfulfilling, and I wasn't, like I said, feeling that there was particular responses to be able to activate change in the world. And there were things around my own family trauma that started coming up at the same time. So it was this moment where I felt completely overwhelmed, and I was doing a lot of inquiry, and it was too overwhelming for me. And I remember I was in the height of depression at the time. And a dream woke me up one day and said very clearly, you have to leave the States. And I said, what? And literally within a couple weeks, my life morphed and changed, and I let go of everything. I grabbed my backpack and I had to listen and talk about surrender. Bought a one-way ticket down to Mexico, back to my parents' homeland, not knowing whether I would return or not. And that whole journey, waking up every single day and asking, okay, I know that life that I was living had a lot of questions. And I said, life, universe, creator, can you help me find some answers? And I'll listen. I'll listen as best as possible. So every day I would wake up and say, where, what do I need to pay attention to? So that particular experience took me to a meditation center, metaphysics school in Guatemala, where I spent literally 9 months in a very, very deep process, in a bout of silence for 50 days, where a lot of this inner exploration and self-inquiry started getting activated in a way that I never had before. So it was during that process that a lot of trauma started surfacing for me to be able to work with. A lot had happened around, again, just suppression of memories from 10 years old up until I was born. And all those memories started surfacing in my body. And for me to deal and process with, I went into a point, I remember doing this one regression where I went into the point of conception and like literally feeling what my parents were feeling in the moment that they were conceiving me. So why I mentioned that particular experience, and again, there's so much that happened in that experience that has framed and almost prophesized what I would be doing now, was because that gave me the foundation and gave me a lot of insight and information in the dream world, in the invisible, that literally has manifested in my life. And it's still revealing itself. And I knew that I thought I would go into midwifery because I kept seeing me taking people in the water and people having birthing experiences. So I said, okay, my path is midwifery. I'll figure out when that's going to be. 9 months after coming out of silence, I came across the water path. And once I came across the water path, I said, oh my God, what that experience was guiding me towards was I was going to be taking people through rebirthing experience with the water. That's what it was signaling. And ever since then, I knew that it was a direct doorway to take people in through transcendental experiences from what I had experienced being in bouts of silence for 50 days. I know that not everyone has the opportunity to go through transcendental experiences and be immersed in that way, but I knew that this was a doorway. It was a shorter doorway to be able to have that access. And I just felt like it was just the calling was there, and I've devoted myself to this work for the past 7 years.
I also love the metaphor of immerse. You immerse yourself in the water.
Totally. Yeah.
So amazing. And I love that it was a dream. So I've been working with my dreams for many years now, and I'll keep a dream journal around. And during one of the more pivotal times in my life, right before, it was actually the year I ended up having the idea for Wild Soul Movement landed in 2013. Earlier that year, it was right after I moved to California as well, I was having dreams where people were screaming at me, "You're not listening."
Oh, wow. Oh, wow. Okay.
And I had to learn how to listen. I was like, what do they mean? I'm not listening to, like, inner voice, right? Go in, inner, like, divine guidance, like, listen. And at the same time, whales and dolphins started coming into my dreams. There were all these different, and water. Oh my God, I have so many water dreams. And I learned to pay attention for what is the water? What does it look like? What's the color? Can I see? Am I swimming? Am I breathing underwater? All these things, all this like rich nuance and messaging that comes through in the dream world that is so amazing if we're willing to pay attention to it.
I mean, I was just having this conversation with a friend last night, and I said, we were talking about dreams because a lot of my work is based on dreams, especially when I work with water. I help people work through the dream space because so much information comes up.
Yeah.
And for me, like I tap into, we can have a complete conversation around the dream world and what that is, because I've had so many experiences in terms of how dreams guide me and what they share. But what I was sharing with a friend last night was, again, we think that going to sleep is going to sleep and it's rest. But actually, there's a part of our consciousness and our subconscious that is working itself through there. So it's still part of our life experience. It's just that we have not paid attention to it. And if you look at mystics and a lot of mystical experiences or mystics that talk about the importance of paying attention to the invisible, that's another realm that we are living in.
Mm-hmm.
And so if the dream space is this opportunity to look at time, it's something beyond time and space. Again, we can bring consciousness to that to help us tap into a superpower that is already there.
Totally.
But it just requires time and effort also to be able to cultivate that muscle.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah. Even just paying attention to it, right?
Yeah.
Even just remembering what you can remember and writing it down. I will often look back on what I've written down from my dreams. Sometimes I just write it down and don't do anything with it. But if it was vivid enough, I'll be like, that was so vivid, I have to write it down. And then I'll look back months later and be like, damn, The interview I was
Right.
just doing before yours was with Jeanette LeBlanc, and it may or may not be up. I don't remember what order they're going in, but she was talking about how Facebook memories are an amazing thing
Yeah.
that pop up and show us where we were like a year or 2 years ago. And in some cases, if you like write and like share yourself on Facebook, which Jeanette and I both do, you'll be like, oh, damn. Thanks, Facebook. I needed that reminder. I forgot. You know, like, I already had some wisdom and I forgot my own shit.
Totally.
And I experienced the same thing in my dreams. Like, oh, damn, that came through. And of course, all in divine timing, right? If I pick up that notebook and I see that thing at that day on that time and I needed to remember, and I'm like, oh, thank you for the reminder.
I needed that.
I
Yeah,
needed
totally.
that.
Totally. So yeah, I mean, it's another place that that can give us so much insight and information. And just hearing you talk about how Facebook memories function, of course, like it's another part that we can tangibly see and say, okay, that's a part of me that I have either forgotten or that, yeah, it just ignites something else in you as well. And then time just almost becomes obsolete because you start to weave that past into this moment right now and see where the reference point has come from, you know? So really powerful.
So I keep feeling like I need to share this story with you, and then we'll see what happens. So I recently, I had met this man like not even 2 months ago, and then, you know, we spent some time together, and it became just like very apparent to me that this was not a healthy person for me to be interacting with. And when I was having the I don't want to see you or talk to you conversation with him, he got very defensive. And one of the things I shared is, I don't feel safe with you. And for me at this point in my life, if I say to anyone, or if anyone were to say to me, I don't feel safe with you, the only acceptable response is, well, what do we need to do? Do we need repair? What can I do to make you feel safe? What's making you feel unsafe, right? It's inquiry, it's curiosity, it's how can we get to safe? And his was very defensive and like questioning me and almost like attacking me. And I'm like, okay, like this is case in point why this isn't going to go anywhere further than this. But as the conversation was coming to a close, well, I decided the conversation was coming to a close. He said to me, I'll just let your tarot cards tell you everything you need to know. And I was like, cool, like you're showing me how you feel about like literally who I am. And it's like, I don't even have tarot, like I have oracle decks and stuff, but I'm like, that's so funny. He never even said anything. Now I know he noticed like all the oracle decks next to my bed, right? But it's like, it just shows me where you stand and like your level of honor or reverence or respect for things outside of like logic and practicality and like Jordan Peterson, right? So I think the thing I want to ask you, but feel free to share anything else if there's something popping for you, is you know, your family, your friends, the people in your world and in your life who knew you before you went and did your journey and have developed your body of work. How do people respond to, accept, view, react to what you do now?
It's been a process. I feel that a lot of my friends in my intimate circle, I mean, I didn't know what was going to happen. Mm-hmm. I didn't know what I was embarking on. So they didn't, I mean, it just, I think there was curiosity on their behalf. And I know that there was also not distrust, but curiosity, concern. Mm-hmm. And there was even when I came back from the journey, there was a bit of dismissiveness. Like they still didn't understand. I still didn't understand. I mean, it took me also years to integrate from living that experience. Mm-hmm. Talk about how the nervous system readapts. It took me literally years to adapt to living back in a city again.
Yeah, I bet.
So their process has also been like, okay, you went on this particular experience, completely transformed yourself. Who are you? How do I engage with you? Mm-hmm. What are you really about? What's the thing that you're doing? And so it's taken me years to show also, and to be more grounded in myself, and to trust also that not only what people are projecting or their own insecurities and doubts around it, but for me to really own my experience. Mm. And by me owning my experience, they were able to show up in a different way and to see what's really there from their perspective, or even, you know, they can see or empathize with me a lot more. and they see the power of what I do.
Yeah.
People see. So even my own family, like I took them through a whole experience and transformation as well, because I literally left without knowing when I would come back. And when I came back, like I said, it was taking me a while to integrate. Integration is so key when we go through these experiences.
Mm-hmm.
That for me is the meat of going through any transformation. And I didn't know how to gain the support systems to be able to help me fully integrate. So I had to figure it out as I went. And I couldn't ask them for support because I didn't know what I needed. And it's been really powerful, in particular with my family, because I've been able to do this work with them.
Mm.
Like, I've been able to take my father in the water, who I've had the most disconnection with in my life, and seen him morph because of that.
So amazing.
So because I've been able to bring my network, my systems into this particular body of work, they see the impact and they see how it changes them. And so I think there's another level of respect and honoring in terms of who I am and what I do.
That's beautiful. And for people listening, I do also want to acknowledge that there might be some like tenderness and heart achiness around hearing a person share that their family has been able to like adjust and come into the fold and like accept and respect. Whereas, with some people in our lives, it's never going to be that way. So that might not be available to everyone. So please don't do the comparison thing, right?
Yeah.
But what you just said, what it just sparked for me is to also remember, when we're on our own journeys, we're in our own healing, growth, transformation, whatever you want to call it, or however you want to label it, we have been someone to someone else, and then we are suddenly different. And they have a grief. That could be traumatizing. That's a loss for a person.
Oh, absolutely.
And how they are responding isn't always because like they're an asshole or they don't understand. I think it's easy to get into that like elite place or that superior place once we're waking up and learning and growing, instead of just remembering that a big change has occurred in us, changing a big change in a relationship that might have been very important to someone has now occurred, and they're having grief, loss, or something that they don't necessarily know how to process or what to say or how to engage with us either.
Yeah.
So to consider that other side with a little more compassion.
Yes. Thank you for mentioning that, because it definitely has, I'm looking back at my life, definitely has catalyzed that in relationships, where it's like, again, I've changed. I don't know how I'm going to show up or, who I'm showing up as fully.
Yeah.
They're just like, I don't know how to interact with you. Who are you?
Yeah.
And it's this synergy that has been broken based on who we were in a particular time. And now we're different people. And so it's not even about mending, because not everything can necessarily be mended.
Yeah.
But if there's an opportunity, how do you re-engage and empathize with the other person's experience?
If there's an opportunity.
If
there isn't always. I love this. So something else that you were saying before we hit record that I'm just curious, wherever you're at with it right now, because I use the word healing a lot, but I always, in my mind, there's always like an asterisk around it and above it, right? And I'm very reluctant to call myself a healer, even though a lot of the work I do is healing, because I don't personally believe that I could heal another. I believe I can facilitate healing, but I'm quite certain that my core belief around healing is that we heal ourselves.
Yes.
So you mentioned also being in like kind of an inquiry and an open area around this word. So anything you feel like or want to share around that?
Yeah, it's been definitely quite an experience, even coming to the point where I could name myself a healer. And there's something in this time of my life that is not deeply resonating. And so that's why I am in this other inquiry around, do I want to continue using this word? And it's feeling like not, because it also feels very binding to me. And it also I feel attributes a level of responsibility or projection that people have in a process where, yeah, you are doing the thing to this other person versus that's not what I do. I don't have your 1, 2, 3 formula on how to heal. What I'm doing is activating a place within you and holding a space so that you can do that deeper inner exploration. My biggest healing moments have been with people in my life who have allowed for the space for me to do that inquiry. I don't follow particular rigid structures per se. I'm a little rebel in that particular way. And so
girl, same.
Yeah. Totally. I feel that we do have that capacity to do that ourselves. I am committed to providing spaces for people to do that because I know of what like that's my offering to the world. That's my offering. But I don't necessarily want to associate myself as a healer because it does feel like I don't want to say I don't want to associate myself. I am doing a lot of exploration around it just because it has a lot of weight.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it necessarily resonates with what I do and how I show up.
I hear you. Also, something I'm always paying attention to, especially now as I've been reading Akashic records for people, has become a thing that I do. I'm doing like 15 to 20 readings a month now. Any kind of healing modality, I don't want people to become addicted to somebody else facilitating something. Right? Like even when I do readings, I tell people, I'm like, I'm not accessing anything that you couldn't access yourself. What I find to be more dignifying and useful about the readings is that being an objective person, right?
Yeah.
Because when you're tapping into your own stuff, there's sometimes that doubt that goes, am I making this up? But when someone else is reading for you and literally saying things to you that they couldn't possibly know about you, that is affirming. I think that hits the subconscious in a way that opens people up in a way to the mysteries.
Yeah.
To go, oh man, like something it cares about me and is working on my behalf and wants to like work with me and see me thrive and grow and heal and whatever. But I tell people like, don't use this as a crutch, right?
Yeah.
Don't let this be this thing outside of you that's more powerful than you are, because it's still just like I like that you use the word activate. It's just activating your own inner wisdom. More than anything, it ends up being very affirming of things that people were already kind of intuiting or wondering or curious about anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. And I do feel when you begin the exploration that you need a support system to hold you as you go through a transition.
Yes.
I do believe that because I needed that myself. I needed people to mirror things and hold me until, again, the engine basically got activated within me and I can trust that.
Yes.
So I think there's a process and I see it as an ebb and flow, right? It's all relationship to water, but you do need a support system to help mirror those things that you're starting to see. And again, integration for me is the most important piece.
Yeah. I hear you. It's important. Yeah. This was so good. I'm gonna come be in the water with you at some point, and we're gonna dance around on Instagram.
Yeah, let's do it.
So, Rocio, as I suspected, this was beautiful. Really, just thank you so much. Richness, depth, layers. I love all the little nuance points. You know how I feel about nuance. So the best place for you all to connect with Rocio is on Instagram. Her name is water_healing. Nice and simple. Some of you may have already connected with her because I share your stuff pretty regularly because it resonates quite a lot. So thank you so much. Anything I didn't ask you as we're on our way out here that you feel like, oh, I want to close that loop or say this thing?
I think this is good. Thank you so much.
Amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the platform. Thank you for the work that you're doing. Thank you for sharing yourself in that way. I really appreciate it. Yeah, and it activates me as well. So thank you for that.
Yes, we're doing it, y'all.
Yeah.
There's a lot of shitty stuff going on out there, but there's a lot of great, amazing stuff and possibility too. So as always, if the episode resonated, share it up wherever you share things, leave a review, go find Rocio. You know what to do. We love you. We'll talk to you later.
Bye.
Is because when we tell our stories, like you said, you use the word ripple effect. So there's the act of telling your story, no matter what medium you tell it in. And I don't care if you tell it to yourself or your journal or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
There is empowerment in telling your story. It doesn't have to be on social media or to the whole wide
Yes,
world
thank
or
you.
on Brene Brown's stage. Having the courage to tell it, period.